All right, we are here and we are getting ready to scare Mare. That's right. This is Isaac. He is looking like a clown. Mare's afraid of clowns. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna scare her with Isaac as a clown.
Is this like creepy? Yeah.
How are you feeling, Mare?
Oh, I feel betrayed.
You just give the clown a hug, Mare.
No, I'm not giving that clown a hug.
Well, scared Mare still can't look at the clown. She's still scared.
But I'm smiling still.
True.
And on the inside, I'm not smiling.
So is the clown.
Take a deep breath.
Yay, we scared Mare. You're the
got
best
me.
Mare.
I can't look at the camera.
I know, but it's Isaac. It's not even a clown, it's your friend Isaac. Oh, I promise that we do actual work around here. Give it up for Nick Walters, everybody. Yes, what a guy. Serving the Lord, serving this podium. Anyways, so yeah, that was super fun today. I so enjoyed scaring Mare. Fun fact, that costume Isaac was wearing was actually a costume that my grandma made for my mom for Halloween in like the 1970s. And it's also the costume that I wore for Halloween throughout high school and college. So you know what kind of person I was. I thought that was a good costume decision. But anyways, yes, that is us. We scare Mare. And my name is Gabby, if we haven't met. I am so excited to get to be back up here and to get to talk to you tonight. And one of my many goals when I'm up here is that you would just learn a little bit more about me every time. I'd love to learn more about you, but I have a microphone and you don't, so that's kind of hard. So we'll do that post-service. But first, about me, one of the things that is very important to know about me, so important that it is on the bio on the website, everybody, is that I am a Badger fan. Do we have any Badger fans in the house tonight? Yes, not as many as I was hoping. Any specifically, I don't want to hear any other names. Any specifically Badger basketball fans? Just my brother. Okay, so I'm alone here. I was expecting so many more hands, but I'm going full steam ahead. In my family, being a Badger fan is something that we're born into. It's not an option. It's a bloodline thing. And as Sophie, who's recently married into the family, has come to find out, it's not optional. So we're training her into it a little bit. But growing up, being a Badger fan was just kind of something that, I was forced to do. And I didn't really get into it for myself. I didn't really make this fandom my own until I was a little bit older in college. And one thing to know about being a Badger fan is that we all come at different amounts. My brother TJ is the truest Badger fan you've ever met in your life. This has nothing to do with anything that you need to know, except it's a great story. There is a video of him at 3 years old, and he has a Bucky Badger basketball in his hands. And some kids have blankets or teddy bears. TJ had a basketball. He took it, he slept with it. It went sledding with him, like he went everywhere. And for Christmas, he gets one, and then he gets a second one. And like normal kids are like, I already have one of these, I don't need another one. And TJ has one under each arm, and he looks at the camera and he goes, 2 Bucky Badger basketballs, I'm a lucky guy. And it's so cute. So anyways, that love, that pure love for the Badgers has continued. For some of us though, some years it's easy to be a Badger fan and some years it's hard to be a Badger fan. And last year it was hard to be a Badger fan. But in the year of 2015, it was a good year to be a Badger fan. We were in the NCAA tournament, March Madness, anyone? Just looking for anything we can connect on here. Okay, good. NCAA tournament, the Badgers were doing so well. I sound so Minnesotan right now. The Badgers were doing so well. We made it, okay, to the Final Four, which is a big deal, and we are playing Kentucky. And Kentucky is undefeated for the season. They're like the kids that we all love to hate, okay? And they're like super arrogant. I don't actually know them, I'm just assuming. And they come in, they think they're predicted to win the whole tournament, and we beat them, and my family flips out. And that means that we are going to the finals, okay? We are going to the NCAA finals, and this is a big deal because the Badgers have never won a final game before. We've never won the tournament. So we're going to the finals, and we are feeling great because we've just beat the team that was supposed to win it all. Like, this game is ours. And so we go into this game, and we're watching it, and the Badgers aren't playing as well as we are hoping. And my family all starts watching the game together. And then my mom and I are forced to move downstairs because my brothers and my dad think that the players and the refs and the coaches can hear them. And so they're coach couching like 100%. And it is doing zero things except stressing me. I'm like stressed thinking about it. I get so stressed. And I'm like, stop, like they know what they're doing wrong. I'm so empathetic. I'm like, they get that they're not doing wrong. They don't need you to tell them. And so we move downstairs and they stay upstairs and we watch the game. And I have this terrible realization that they are gonna lose this game. And sure enough, the game that we were supposed to win, they lose. They lose. The tournament like falls out of our hands, and my whole family, we don't want to talk to each other. We don't want to look at each other. And so I just go up straight to bed. And I was a little bit surprised at like how emotional this failure was to me because I am not a Badger basketball player. I don't know anyone on the team. This game really does not impact my life in any significant way. But there I was that night, lying awake in bed for hours. I couldn't sleep. I was so emotionally impacted by this event. And I was like, I can't believe they lost. I can't believe what's going on. Are the players okay? What are they feeling? I was so impacted by this failure, and I couldn't even believe it. And we're in this series about fear, and we're talking about 4 common fears that we have as people and what they keep us from stepping into. And 2 weeks ago, Jeremy talked about the fear of what people think, and he talked about how that can keep us from stepping into the identity that God gives us and that God calls us to. And last week he talked about the fear of being alone, and he says that that can keep us from recognizing and from going places and knowing that God is going to go with us wherever we go. And this week we're going to talk about the fear of failure. And I think we're all afraid of failure because even little silly failures like a sports game loss can really upset us. In fact, psychologists will say that if a sports team is doing well, we'll use pronouns to associate ourselves with them. So we'll say like, we're winning, we're doing a great job, we are crushing it. But if a team is losing, we want to disassociate ourselves from them. So we'll be like, they lost. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know how they were playing. And so it's naturally ingrained in ourselves to associate ourselves with success and to distance or hide or disassociate ourselves with failure. And I don't think that's a surprise, and I don't think when I say that we're talking about the fear of failure, anyone is surprised because our whole society is orientated around this understanding of success, right? And how success means that you are doing well in life. Success is the measure by which we measure how people are doing. What do we want to know about people? What job they have, how much money they make, what house they live in, what's their GPA, what's their team's score for the season, what's their record. And so we literally structure our lives measuring, understanding that successes are good things and that failure are bad things. And one of the major problems with this is that when we step into something that's a failure, whether that is a job or a relationship or a test or anything like that, because we are so comfortable with using success and failure to measure how we're doing in life, when something fails, it's not just that event or that occurrence that fails, it's us that fail. And what happens is we connect our successes and our failures to our self-worth. And so what we've ended up doing is connecting failure with shame. We've attached failure and shame together. So that when we fail, it's not just the circumstance, it's not just the occurrence, but it's actually us. And so that failure gets to say something about our self-worth. We get to experience shame because of it. And shame is just these feelings of worthlessness. And I know in my life, this has definitely come through before. I've experienced shame that comes along with failure. I remember last April, Keith and I were leading our first junior high retreat, kind of leading it ourselves, and we're all excited for it. And it comes to the Saturday night service, and historically, this Saturday night service has been a really impactful night, a really big deal. And so before I'm like preparing the leaders, I'm like, okay, we're gonna have you stand in the back, and then other people are like, students are gonna come back and pray with you, and I'm kind of coaching them how to do it. And it gets to the service, and I get up and I start to talk, and even then I can kind of tell like things are a little bit off. I can kind of tell when I'm crashing and burning, and it kind of feels like I'm crashing and burning. And so I finish my message, and I say, all right, now the leaders are gonna be in the back for prayer. I step off, the worship band steps on, I step in the back with all the other leaders, and we stand there, and we wait, and we wait. And 2 songs go by, and not a single student comes back for prayer. And I'm like mortified at this point. And 2 songs in, that's like literally all I can stand. So I go back up on stage and I say, okay, we're gonna dismiss to small group. And I hold myself together, and then I do what I think most of us do when we fail. I ran away, and I cried, and I called my mom. And and what that conversation wasn't, hey, I'm really bummed that this service didn't go the way I wanted it to. I'm really upset because I thought this could be something and then it really wasn't. That conversation with my mom was, I feel like a failure. I feel like I failed. I feel like I'm not cut out for this. I feel like I can't replace what was there ahead of me. I feel like I compromised all of these junior hires' faith walk. Now none of them are going to believe anymore. I attached that failure to my value. And so there I was, sitting in the shame of failure. And I think that's true for so many of us, that we attach failure and shame together. And so we're hardwired to seek out success and avoid failure. And I think we approach our faith the same way. I don't think it's any surprise that one of the most attractive and deceptive models of faith is the prosperity gospel. Right? That this promise that if you just believe, you'll get money and you'll get blessings and you'll get healing and you'll get all the good things you want and God's going to bless you. You just have to have faith. What is that doing? That's attaching our measure, our metric for success, and projecting it onto God. And saying, God is going to make you successful. Of course it's attractive. The only problem is that it's also a lie. And when we look at the text, when we look at God's story of how he's worked throughout history, what we see again and again is that the story of God is actually marked with failure. God's story is marked with failure. And there's so many examples I can use, but I think it's particularly striking that at the end of Christ's life, at the end of his ministry, he ends up dying on a cross and all of his followers abandon him. By any account, his ministry ends with a total and complete failure. And we know what springs up out of that, but again and again we see that God's story is marked with failure. And I think one of the biggest failures is a guy named Peter. And Peter is one of Jesus's closest followers. He's probably one of the 3 closest followers that travel with Jesus for 3 years. And again, you can read in the Gospels how Peter messes up. He says things he shouldn't say. He does things he shouldn't do. He's a little bit of a failure. But it sort of all culminates at the end of Christ's life. Because what happens is that Jesus offers Peter this incredible calling. He says, Peter, you are going to be the rock on which I'm going to build my faith. Basically, what he's saying is, I'm going to do something brand new in the world. I'm starting out the next chapter, and I want you to be the foundation of it. This incredible calling. But what happens is a little bit later, Jesus is sitting with the disciples and he's about to die, and he's basically telling them, I'm gonna die and you are all gonna fall away. You're all gonna abandon me. And Peter says, Lord, I'm never gonna do that. I'm never gonna fall away. I'm never gonna abandon you. That's not me. And Jesus looks at Peter and he says, actually, before the rooster crows, you're gonna deny me 3 times. And sure enough, what happens is as Jesus is crucified, Peter, standing at a coal fire, denies Jesus 3 times. And as the rooster crows, and as Peter and Jesus lock eyes in that moment, Peter knows that he has failed. That he is a total and complete failure. And so what does he do? He does what we do when he fails. He runs away, he cries. He probably called his mom. It's not in the text, but I'm just assuming. But what we see is that Jesus isn't done, even though it looks like it, and he's back, and he's doing something new. And so that calling that's placed on Peter's life is still there. But what is Peter doing? Peter doesn't step back in that. He goes out and he goes fishing. He steps away from that. He still feels like a failure. He still feels that shame. And Jesus shows up to where Peter is, and he's on the beach, and Peter comes to him, and Jesus asks him this question. He says, Peter, do you love me? And Jesus knows the answer, but Peter says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you, right? Even though Peter feels like a total failure, he can't deny that he does love Jesus. That is who he is. And so Jesus asks it again. He says, Peter, do you love me? And Jesus says, yes, Lord, I love you. And Jesus asks it again, and he says, Peter, do you love me? And at this point, Peter's fed up. He says, Lord, you know everything. What is he saying? Lord, you know that I love you. You also know that I failed you. You know everything I've done. You've predicted what I was going to do, and then I did it anyways. You know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus says, then feed my sheep. And what we see in this interaction is something incredible, is that Peter's failure does not discount him, does not count him out on the calling that Jesus has placed on his life. That Peter's failure does not leave him out. Jesus does not consider that a reason to not call Peter. And what we're seeing in this instance is Peter thinks that he's down and out. Peter thinks that he's done. And Jesus is telling Peter, I care far more about who you're becoming than what you do. I care far more about who you are, what your heart looks like, than what you achieve or what you fail. You know what Jesus could have asked Peter? Peter, do you know that you messed up? Peter, do you know that you failed? Yes, Lord. Peter, do you know that I knew that you would fail and I told you that you would fail and then you failed? Yes, Lord. Peter, do you feel bad about it? Yes, Lord. But no. Instead, Jesus looks at Peter and he says, Peter, do you love me? Peter, I know who you are. Peter, I know what's inside of your heart. Peter, I know that you failed, but I'm calling you anyway. And I wonder if we could understand this, if we would be so much less afraid to step into failure. You see, I wonder if we're so scared of failure because the whole time we've just been measuring by the wrong metric. I wonder if we're scared of failure because we have been walking around with this understanding that what we achieve and what we fail at, that says something about our worth and who we are. But in this text, we see that God is more concerned with who you're becoming than with what you do. God is way more caught up. He's way more concerned on who you're becoming than what you do. You know what success looks like to us? Success looks like promotions gained and dollars made and tests aced and games won. But success to God looks like his kingdom being more fully realized on the earth. And that's just a fancy way of saying success to God looks like the places and the parts of us that are dead and broken and dead, that those things would turn into love. Success to God looks like us and the world around us looking more like love. If we can understand that, we can understand that God isn't concerned by what we do, but by who we are. He's concerned with what our heart looks like. And so you know what God wants to do? He wants to replace the shame you feel with love. Can you imagine what it would feel like to step into failure but not be met with shame? Can you imagine what it would feel like to step into failure and be met with love? This hasn't happened a lot in my life, but I was thinking about one time, and it was one of the strangest experiences of my life. I was leading my first Bible study, and as someone that didn't have a lot of extracurricular talents, this was a big deal to me. And so I'm so excited, and I go, and I'm prepared, and I give my whole Bible study. And then at the end, one of my youth pastors is there, and he sits down with me, and he's talking, and I'm like, And a few minutes into the conversation, it dawns on me, and I go, I think I failed. Wait a second. He's telling me a lot of stuff that I could do better next time. I think I failed. And it was the weirdest experience because I was so used to failure being met with shame that when it was met with love and encouragement, I couldn't even recognize it. So I went home and I thought, wow, that was kind of a failure, but I don't feel bad about myself. Because I had spent those minutes being encouraged and lifted up and saying, you know what, you can do this better next time, and you can do this better next time. And you know what happened? The next time they came around to lead a Bible study, I wasn't scared. I didn't think to myself, oh, I'm not good enough, I can't do that. I said, yeah, I'll do it. Because in that moment, my failure wasn't met with shame, it was met with love. And we see that with Peter on the beach, that his failure is met with love instead of shame. I think we'd be so much less afraid to step into failure if we knew that what was waiting on the other side, whether we succeed or fail, is love. I think we'd start to understand that God wants to use success and failure to make us into who we are meant to be. Think about it. Think about Peter as he's setting off to lead this church. As he's literally laying the foundation for a church that we're still a part of today. Think about that experience he has with Jesus and how real love and grace and forgiveness becomes to him in that moment. I think through that failure, God is teaching him an incredible lesson that he goes on to share as he starts this church, that he understands love and forgiveness and grace in such an incredible way. You see, following Jesus means we'll be led to into success and failure to be formed into the person God's calling us to be. The truth is that we don't have to be afraid of failure because God wants to use it all to form us into the person that we're meant to be. And he wants to remind us that that is just another step in our faith and that it doesn't change our worth at all. But I don't want you to just take my word for it. I want you to hear from a friend of mine. So can we welcome my friend Max to the stage? Yes. And J-Lo. Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah, that'll be good. Thank you. Everyone say hi, Max. Max. Okay, so full disclosure, I didn't memorize all the questions, so I will be reading them. But obviously we invited you up here so that you can talk about failure.
Yeah, thank you very
much.
Super fun. Yeah.
You're welcome. But before we jump into that, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay, yeah. So my name is Max Gerke. One thing I'm really proud of is that I was baptized in this church. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
I wasn't.
My parents are Gwen and Charlie. You might know them, or my little brother and sister, Grace and Hank. A little bit about me. I went to Hudson High School. Was
Raiders.
a Raider.
Go Raiders.
Go Raiders. I went to Wheaton College. I wrestled there, and I did Army ROTC as well. Yeah.
Cool.
What else would you like to know?
So specifically, we want to talk a little bit about your wrestling career and that
see.
what was like. Surprise.
Well, kind of. It is a surprise. I think I've known you about 10 years, and this is like the first time she's asked me about wrestling. So.
Yeah, I care about taking shots, not
Yeah,
wrestling.
2 times in one night about sports. This is our lucky day. Sorry.
I like what sports I like, and I don't like what sports I don't like. Anyways,
Okay.
so tell us a little bit about wrestling and kind of what some of your goals were and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I've wrestled since kindergarten, since I was 5 years old. And I mean, my last year was this past year as a senior in college. I went to state in high school and I got 4th place. I was super excited. Then I went to college and I was like, all right, I guess I'll do this too. I was a heavyweight the first 3 years, and I decided my senior year, one of my goals was to be an All-American and to qualify for the national tournament. And I
legit.
so I didn't qualify the first 3 years at heavyweight, so I decided that I was going to drop about 60 pounds and wrestle at 197 for my senior year.
So, is this current weight? Is this a no-no to ask? I'm just wondering, is this like pre-60 pounds or post-60 pounds, what you are currently looking at you?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Are we looking at Max Gerke today with 60 pounds, or are we looking at Max Gerke after he lost 60 pounds?
Well,
It's
I
fine, we
did
don't-
lose the 60 pounds. I did put on a little bit after that, if we're gonna go there.
Okay.
But, yeah. So
I like
this
just
is
talking about
like
how we
this
shouldn't
is
feel shame.
this
and
is
I'm just like,
this is in between heavyweight
okay,
and
got it.
197.
Okay, got it. So previous Max was a little heavier waiter year.
Very much heavier
and
waiter.
Senior year Max is a little bit lighter.
Yes.
Okay, so that's obviously a big goal, and obviously you have to do a lot of intense stuff to get there.
Right.
So did that create any fear? We're talking about fear tonight. Did that create any fear or pressure as you were pursuing that?
I mean, yeah, so like going into my senior year, there was a ton of pressure because like in my mind, consciously or subconsciously, like this is like one of the most important things to me, and
Yeah.
I had been doing it all my life. So come senior year, I know there's nothing after this. It was kind of like, wow, this is like the culmination of your whole wrestling
Yeah.
career. Like, this is big. This is my last shot.
Yeah.
So there was
Yeah.
a ton of pressure. Fear, not right away, because I kind of thought I would do it. I thought I would be able to do it. But definitely, so my season really didn't go nearly
Yeah,
as
talk
well
about
as
that a
I
little bit.
planned.
What happened after you set this goal?
Yeah, so it's a really long season, and I dropped all that weight, and I was having a really tough time continuing to make weight and continue to compete while I lost a lot of my muscle mass and strength. So I was out there, and I was like feeling like I really should be winning, but I was losing a lot of matches. So yeah, I started to fear like about halfway through the season, I was like, you know, what happens if I don't do it?
Yeah.
You know, what if I'm not good enough to be an All-American or qualify? So yeah, that was definitely a big fear.
And so, play out the rest of the story for us. Do you qualify? Do you make it to nationals?
Yeah, so I didn't, and this is funny because this is something like, I was sitting in that chair back there, I'm like, I'm kind of having some fear of talking about this.
Your failure?
Yeah, I don't like to.
There's only love here.
I don't even like to think about it, but
Yeah.
What happened was I got injured at the end of the year, but I mean, regardless of that injury, it wasn't looking like I was going to qualify anyways. So, no, I didn't make it. I didn't.
Yeah, so you set these goals, you obviously go to like pretty extreme lengths to achieve them, and then your failure is just, it arrives, it's right there. So kind of what was that like, and what would you say you learned about yourself and your faith in that time period?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, I came to a point where it was right after I tore my AC joint in my shoulder, and I got on the treadmill like the next morning to try to like hopefully maintain, like not be too heavy, to lose some weight, and I just couldn't run, and I was like, wow, like regionals are in like a week, and I can't even run. I'm not even close to wrestling. So I basically knew at that moment that it was over. And then I just got off the treadmill, took a couple steps. I was the only one in the wrestling room, and I sat down on a chair, and I was like, took a deep breath, and I just waited. I was like, assuming like I was gonna be like overcome with grief or despair or something. I was like, wow, like this is gonna be a big moment. And then like nothing came, and then I was like, okay, that's weird. And then I just started to pray. And as I started to pray, I just was overcome with the strangest sense of peace that I've ever felt, because it was the last thing I was expecting at the time. Yeah. And I mean, amidst all the disappointment, I was still really disappointed and sad, but I still felt peace through that.
Yeah. I think what's so incredible is that sort of the thing that you're afraid of comes to fruition. You fail, and then you find out that that fear wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be, which is so cool. So I think a lot of us do have a fear of failure. So having experienced that, what would you say to us?
Yeah, and this is interesting, because like I would love to say that like, oh, like this is what I learned through my biggest failure, and like I have something like really profound to say, but I really don't. It's something I'm still trying to process and work through. But what I would say to that question is, that's a really bad perspective, but I think that it's something that as Christians we fall into like all the time. I think as Christians we always want like God to like deliver us from whatever adversity or trial we're going through, but instead like we need to ask God, because we know He will deliver us like in the adversity, like if that makes sense. It's something that my small group on Monday just talked all about. So
shout out to his Monday guys. Small group.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, we want all these successes, and we want to be on the mountaintop all the time, but
Yeah. So would you say that God has formed you as a person through success and failure?
Yeah, I would.
Wow. All right, everyone, give it up for Max. You can take your stool with you. Oh, or both. Sweet. Wow. Hey, I think what was really incredible to me about that story was that Max's fears are realized, and what he had spent so much time working towards, it doesn't work out, and he fails. And in that moment, what he realizes is that the thing that he was most scared of wasn't as bad or wasn't as scary as he thought it was going to be. And instead, there was something for him on the other side of failure. And so to end tonight, I just want to share a couple questions. And this first one was something that was asked to me a few years ago, and I haven't been able to get it out of my mind, because I think it's a really incredible question. And it's this: what could you do if you weren't afraid to fail? Like, what would you be able to do if you weren't afraid to fail, if you knew you couldn't fail? Or maybe a better one is, what could you do for the kingdom if you knew you wouldn't feel shame? What would you be unafraid to step into? What act of love that God might be calling you to do could you step into if you knew success or failure, there was no shame waiting for you on the other side? What would you step into? Who could we become if we weren't afraid to step into failure? Who could we grow to be as people if failure wasn't something we were afraid to step into? How much more could we look like love if we weren't afraid to fail? How many people in this valley could experience God's love as we do things for Him, and as we try things for Him, and as they succeed or they fail? Right? The lie is that we can only do something for God. We only succeed in doing something for God if it succeeds. But what we realize is that God works through our successes and our failures. So how much more like love could we turn out to be if we weren't afraid to fail? Will you pray with me? Lord, we are thankful for your grace and your love, that through it all, as we try to follow you, that you meet us again and again with love and grace, and that you cast out fear and that you cast out shame. And so I just ask that you would just make us people that live in freedom, Lord, that we would live free to step into whatever you have for us. And that whatever's on the other side of that, Lord, that we would be unaware, but that we would be certain that you are calling us to look more and more like love. May we be a people that's less concerned about what we succeed in and more concerned about the state of our hearts. Lead us and guide us in this. In your name we pray. Amen.